us now to talk more about that, as well as to keep tabs on this continued persecution of religious minorities in Iraq and elsewhere in the Middle East. It's our friend Walid Phares, the Middle East expert, author of the book The Lost Spring, U.S. Policy in the Middle East and Catastrophes to Avoid. Walid, thanks for joining us this Friday morning here on America's Forum.
Thank you so much for having me, Congressman.
I guess we're in the realm of wordsmithing, but it's important to understand definitions. Counterterrorism or war? Is this just a battle of semantics as to America's overall mission?
This is really a political battle because the administration, which committed, the president, of course, and members of the administration committed that they're here to end wars. So it would be a little bit difficult for them to admit that they are opening a very large war. Some in the administrations, when they declared the strategy, said it's going to be for many years, multiple years. If this is a general effort of counterterrorism, then we are changing political science. We are changing international relations. Then the Afghan war, which is very similar to what we're going to be doing here, going after the Taliban, would be a counterterrorism effort. So would be the case in Iraq or in other places. I think what is happening right now is that the administration wants to begin this campaign, but really doesn't know how to end it, doesn't see yet the boots on the ground. So our part will be counterterrorism, as Secretary Kerry has said, and then hopefully the Arabs and others will be the boots on the ground, or will have the forces on the ground.
And let's talk about the Arab world in terms of the reaction from Arab nations to what the president had to say Wednesday night. Has there been a uniform reaction that you've been able to detect?
There has been several reactions, Congressman. Of course, because of how we dealt with Syria last year, there is a little trust that this administration will put a full-fledged support for a long period of time, especially that people in the Middle East knows that we are withdrawing by the end of the year, as the president said in the press conference, from Afghanistan. So they see the massive withdrawal happening. Yes, we are sending dozens, maybe hundreds of advisors to the Iraqis, maybe to the Kurds, but without a determination that it is going to be the absolute defeat of ISIS, not just a pushback, not just the weakening of ISIS, but a full determination. I think our allies needs to see more, including mostly Saudi Arabia and Egypt and other countries in the neighborhood.
So in other words, these nations who the administration is depending upon are stepping back a little bit because they're perceiving mixed signals even now from the United States?
They're looking at the past, Congressman. You have multiple issues. The largest issue is that Egypt is going to be the largest body in this trans-Arab anti-terror force. But Egypt still has problems with the administration. So they're waiting to settle these problems. Egypt has been fighting the jihadists in the Sinai, has been striking or helping the Libyans go against the jihadists, and the administration has not been very supportive so far. So that has to be settled. The Saudis also have some problems with regard to Assad. What is the future of the Assad regime? So the administration needs to come on the second step and say, I'm calling on Egypt, I'm calling on the Saudis, I'm calling on these countries, so that there is a strategic trust reestablished.
Well, let's change topics now, Walid. Something you and I have talked about before and sadly remains very much in the news, the persecution of religious minorities in the Middle East, specifically in Iraq. The background, we know ISIS attacked the Yazidis. You had dramatic recollections of phone calls with the folks on Mount Sinjar. I thought it was interesting the other night, the president made mention of Mount Sinjar. How is that regarded now? Are people safe there? What's the latest?
Well, people are forgetting what's happening while things on the ground are still dramatic. There are still Yazidis on Mount Sinjar, not all of them, of course, but more important, there's more than 500,000 Christians and Yazidis, probably up to 700,000, both of them, as refugees displaced inside Iraq, in Kurdistan, while their districts, that would be the Nineveh plain for the Christians and the Sinjar districts for the Yazidis, are occupied by ISIS. So there is an urge that the administration will take action specifically, because this is about ethnic cleansing. This is not just counterterrorism. And ethnic cleansing means that there should be operations to push back ISIS from these two areas, bring back the minorities, and empower them to defend themselves. So we are waiting on the administration to see if they will be taking action in this regard.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Walid, but as I listened to the president, he seemed to explain it in his national address as if Mount Sinjar was a success. Is he misinformed, or was he deliberately misleading people, trying to put the best face on it?
The Yazidi leaders who are leading that movement have been telling us that there has been, hundreds and hundreds of people have been killed, thousands of women and children captured, are still in captivity. And they're telling us, and they told us, when there was a visit at the Security Council of the United Nations, that no power, including the United States, have been organizing a rescue operation for these thousands of women and children. So the drama is still there, and their hope is that the administration with their allies will mount an operation to free these people.
While we wait to see what happens in the Middle East, back in Washington, a conference was held to deal with the issues of persecution. Tell us more about that conference. Who was involved, and what, if anything, came out of it?
Well, the conference basically was important because there were four patriarchs of these communities coming from Iraq, from Syria, from Lebanon. They met here with a number of NGOs, and many politicians from the region came, and they met ultimately with the president. You have two opinions about the conference. One is that it is going to help because it showed that all the church leaders were involved and are putting pressure. And then you have criticism that we read about, which is that they are focusing on ISIS threat, but they are not really focusing on what Iranian regime and the Assad regime and Hezbollah have also been doing with regard to the minorities. So the hope now is that in the next steps, such conferences will look at the future of these minorities in terms of their protection by the international community. Because minorities today, Christians, particularly in Iraq, do not trust anymore anybody to protect them after this ethnic cleansing. They need to be recognized by the United Nations. They need to be protected by the United Nations. And most importantly, congressmen, they need to be armed and organized as communities so that in the future, other attacks by ISIS or by other jihadists won't ethnic cleanse them again.
Walid, we were speaking earlier with Alan Dershowitz. We had some video shot from a dinner where Senator Ted Cruz was speaking, and he was booed off the stage in terms of his vocal support of Israel. Was that at this particular conference or something else?
No, that was the conference. Actually, that was the moment where the conference changed direction, according to reports that we saw. And we saw, of course, the footage. The conference had actually invited Senator Ted Cruz as a keynote speaker. So one would think that they would have spoken about the talking points and what to be said, what not to be said. Senator Cruz had addressed Middle East Christian communities conferences in Washington many times, including one in June with the Copts. So his narrative was the same. I mean, Senator Cruz cannot change his political opinion. They can invite him or not invite him. What has happened is that militants who are very close to the Syrian regime, to Hezbollah, to the Iranian regime, who are were very present at the conference, booed him. And in Lebanon, the press that is close to Hezbollah is saying, we booted out Senator Cruz from the conference in Washington. So this is the downside.
So really, this was almost a rear guard action, an infiltration of extremist groups into a, quote, Christian conference?
Well, from the beginning, there were articles warning us that in this conference, we're going to see a lot of voices that are close to the Assad regime. Actually, the argument by some in the conference has been, oh, the Assad regime is much better than ISIS because it protects the Christians. And who's the ally of the Assad regime? Hezbollah. So when Senator Cruz attacked Hezbollah and said Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS are all terrorist organizations, it provoked them to react. That is the deep reason for why this incident occurred.
So is this a metaphor for stepping carefully in building the coalition, given the antipathy toward Israel among several Arabs?
Well, it is very important for members of Congress to know exactly where they're going when they are invited to conferences. If they want to be free and say what their mind is and talk about, first, the persecution of minorities, second, terrorism, they need to be briefed much better as to who is organizing these conferences. Because in the Middle East, in Lebanon, those who are in charge of politics are mostly on the Syrian, Hezbollah, Iranian side. And that is not a secret. It's well known. It's in the Lebanese press.
I believe the scriptural admonition in the New Testament to be as wise as serpents and as innocent as doves. Important to know exactly to whom you're speaking and how to make the best case. As always, Dr. Walid Phares, we appreciate your insights. Once again, the new book by Dr. Phares entitled The Lost Spring, U.S. policy in the Middle East, and catastrophes to avoid. Are we avoiding a catastrophe or are we walking into one? Your thoughts on what's happening? I'd love you to tweet me your comments at NewsmaxTV, #America's Forum.
When